If you are under Windows, Linux, or OS, you can download and install XAMPP, which includes Apache, MariaDB, and PHP. Also inside is included PHPMyAdmin. And if you would like to see the manual installation, I can show you how to do it under Linux. And if you're using Windows 10, you have the option to run Ubuntu using the Windows subsystem for Linux. So you can go to this address and install SL. It's pretty easy to do so. Afterwards, just choose an operating system. So for example, Ubuntu. And then when you download and install Ubuntu, everything is automatically. You set up just one user and you have access to the Ubuntu terminal. So the commands can be valid for you too. Now to the manual setup, we'll start by opening the shell and typing sudo apt install MySQL Server. This will install the MySQL Server. We'll wait for its installation. Then we'll have the server already configured for us. We need to set up the root password. So we'll type MySQL secure installation, but with sudo privileges. So we'll type sudo MySQL secure installation. And then we are able to set up the default MySQL Server password. So I advise you to remember this password. After setting the password, you can secure, if you would like, your installation and to reload the privilege tables in order to make the changes active. Then we'll need to set up the ways we can access this MySQL server from outside. So we'll connect to our MySQL server with sudo MySQL -u root, and then we'll run this line. So we'll use a password authentication for root at localhost, and we'll identify it with this password. In this way, we can log in with user root and password of password. And again, we'll run flush privileges to make the change happen. With the next line, sudo apt install PHPMyAdmin, we'll be able to run the installation of PHPMyAdmin in order to run it on localhost. Keep in mind that here you'll be asked for provision of password for the user PHPMyAdmin. And after its configuration, we should be able to go to localhost PHPMyAdmin and log in into the administrative application. Here we provide the root username and the password we set for this username during the MySQL installation. And that's how you can access all the databases and have control over them. For running PHP scripts, you can type sudo apt install p, and this will automatically install the PHP version for you. And then you need to go to the directory where your scripts are residing. For example, here I have a stars.php script and DBconnect.php. And in order to run those scripts, I will run the following command, php -s, and then localhost and port 8080. In this way, if I go to localhost and 8080, the interpreter will be able to run my PHP files. So if I run the server and go to the browser, I should be able to run requests, and I can type stars.php here. That's our PHP script, which has already established connection to our database. In order to start coding our start rating script, we will start first by creating the HTML file for our stars. So we'll give one unordered list, and then inside each star will go into list item. The stars will use HTML entities, and so by typing this code and saving and refreshing, we'll see that little star has appeared already in our browser. So let's give the UL a class of star rating, also class of star icon. Of course, if we refresh, nothing will be changed, but let's add some styling to our stars. Let's add another star, actually. If we refresh, we see that they are positioned vertically. Let's try to fix this and display them horizontally. We'll do this by styling them. Let's go to the star icon. The star icon is each of the stars here. You can see I will add some color. We will increase the font size, and in order to fix the stars to display horizontally, we will make their position relative and the display inline. If we refresh, we see our stars here. They're not filled with any information right now. We'll continue by creating full stars. So in order to do this to some of the stars, let's say the first one, we'll add a class full. And we'll create a CSS style for this star. We would like to replace the code which is currently residing in the star and to put another star above it. I will do this by positioning another star on top of this current star. And we'll use absolute positioning, and we'll give a left coordinate of 0 for this star. So let's do all this now. In order to change the content of the star or this HTML here, we'll add this rule before, and inside we'll add change of the color, add the same star, because if we don't add content, we'll not be able to change a color of an empty star. So this is actually a full star displayed. So we have empty star here displayed via HTML and a full star displayed via CSS, which is changing the content of the current element and its left coordinate of 0. If we refresh, the first star we see is filled with yellow. So we know now how to create full stars. Let's create one half star. We'll add the rule half. And again, we'll do this rule for the half star before rule set for the CSS. Of course, we'll use the same color and the same content as well as the position on the left. So we copy those rules. The specific ones is that we want to show only half star. So it's 50% of the star. If we type it like this, let's see what will happen with the second star. It fills the 100% of the width of the star is having, no matter what. So even if we open this tag and see the before rule is acting on the left side of the star, but we cannot apply this rule directly like this. So it just overflows the whole content of the star below. So in order to this to be effective, we will just set the property of overflow to hidden. That's how the rest of the content of the yellow star will not cover the background white star of the star. So if we refresh, we get our half star already displayed. Okay, so by now we'll have full star, half star, and the rest of the empty stars displayed. If we would like to achieve this functionality in which, as you can see, all the stars get highlighted, and if we highlight the 5 star, all the previous 4 are being highlighted, as you can see. We have to make slight changes to our code. Let's try to style the stars on being active when the mouse hovers them. So we'll do this by using this class star rating, which will target the URL element. And for each list items, our mouse is being over them. We will display just the full star. So we will set again the width to 100%. We'll put the star in a yellow color, and we can add some text shadow effect. Also, we would like to change the cursor to pointer. So when our mouse hovers, to be displayed as a hand. So if we refresh, we can see that by the time we target those stars, the cursor has changed, and we have the perception that we are actually clicking on a star. From the visual standpoint, it's not very nice that we cannot select the previous stars together with the current one. So when we select the second one, the first one should be also selected. CSS has some limitations over this, but we can use CSS rules which allow us to select the current star and all of its predecessor stars. And we use the trick to reverse the order of the stars. So visually they will appear the way we like them. So in order for this to happen, we'll have to change our HTML as well as CSS styling. Now, first off, we will display the blank stars, then the half star, and then the full star. So don't worry that this will change a little bit the perception right now, but with the styling, we'll make everything looks fine. Okay, this is the reversed order of the stars. Now we'll change 2 items of the styles of the stars. So the star icon will change the direction to right to left, and we'll do some overrides. Okay, if we refresh, we see that they start to appear in the right way. Just we'll need to fix the second star. This will be very easy because we'll just need to change its direction to left to right. If we refresh, we'll get our script working. Okay, so now let's expand this rule by adding this line star rating hover. This will get the current star highlighted, and we'll get all the stars which are displayed after it in the HTML. But because we have reversed our code, this will target exactly for the second star, the first, and for the third star, the second and the first. So if we add this rule and refresh, we'll get the following result. The first star highlighted, the second one, and we see the first also is highlighted. That's how our initial concept is realized by reversing the order of the stars. All right, let's fix this half star, which is having a background of white instead of the gray one. We'll do this by just copying the icon half style and pasting it as the same style here, but instead of before, we use the word after, and And of course, it will create the full star, but in order to target the right part of the star, which we just created with this rule, we'll just copy the last rule here from on line 53 and add it, but this time targeting the after CSS declaration. We'll save and refresh, and we'll have the full functioning star rating CSS and HTML variant. Let's see how we can call this HTML to be outputted by PHP. For this, let's just save it as stars page. Let's create some functions which will output the same HTML to the browser. First, we open the PHP tag, close it, and inside we'll have two functions. One will be create stars, the other will be calculate stars. First, let's see how we can calculate stars based on certain input. Let's say we have input of 1.6. This is the current rating. We'll want to transform it into one full star and one half star. So how we can do this? We'll create function calculateStars, and which will have two parameters. First is the maximum number of stars we can have, and the second is the current rating that we want to display. So for the maximum number of stars, it's usually 5. Let's calculate out of the rating how many full stars we would like to display. Full stars will create such variable, and the function floor will floor just the rating. If we provide a rating of 6.7, it will remain the 6. And let's, of course, try to use this function right now. Let's type 5 and the rating of 6.7. Echo the result here onto the screen. We save and we load our PHP file. We see that we get 6. So this is the full number of stars we would like to display. Let's grab the second part. This time we'll change to, let's say, 4.5. The second part will be the half stars, and we'll just remove from the overall number the full stars. So if we point 4.5, save and refresh, and we see that we'll have only one half star. It's based on this function seal. The gray stars is just the difference between the maximum provided, and this point is 5, with the sum of full stars and half stars. If we echo, so we have 4 full stars, 1 half star, and there is no place, of course, for the 0. That's why the gray stars are 0. If we point a little rating, we'll have 3 full stars, 1 half, and 1 gray star. Okay, nice calculations. Let's return those calculations as an array to be able to use them in the next function. If we assign a variable stars and then print this variable to the screen, we'll have those values saved in the array. Next function will be the display stars. For now on, the display star function will use one parameter which is called rating. At first, we'll like output nothing to the user. Then we'll just get the number of stars saved. We'll get them from the previous function calculateStars, and we put 5 as a maximum of the stars that we can have and display, and the rating, which is the current rating provided by the parameter rating. Afterwards, we'll grab the full stars, the half and the gray stars. Those are the values from the array of the previous function. Those values saved in those variables. And if we type display star and give 4.3 a rating, it will go to calculateStars and fill in those variables, which we will use to create our star rating. We'll output stars in the display star function, as we can see. First, we are doing the empty star icon, and as much as empty stars we can have up to 1 half star. So for the half star, we use the same element, just can copy the code actually. One thing left is to display the full stars. Keep in mind that this order is just because we would like the stars to be displayed in reverse order. So this is the half star. We add the half class to the star icon. And now for the full stars, we loop over the number of full stars we have, and of course use the same markup by just replacing star icon half with full class, again displaying the star. So this is actually the representation of the whole displaying of the stars. As you can see from the output variable, it has some dot in front of it, which means that we are appending to the output. We are returning the output on the end, and let's test it with display star. We see that it works. We have to echo it. Let's check now how many full, gray, and half stars we can append this CSS file at the beginning of the PHP file. And this is our code which produces stars based on the number or rating we put inside the parentheses. Now let's see how we can add everything into a database so that we can save our ratings there. We enter the database with our user and password. Okay, let's create first the database ratings and the table ratings in which we would like to save our star data. As you can see, we have ID, total volts, and total value and used IPs. Those are the fields we would like to save for each individual star. We just copy and paste this code and run the query. This will create a special database table in which we can store our star data. Let's create one from insert, arbitrary data. And we can see we inserted one row. Of course, because it has ID of 1, we can display this data. Let's go back in the code and create a function which will fetch the data from the database and display it afterwards using the displayStar function. So we will call this function stars. We'll pass as a parameter the ID of the current star we would like to display. Let's set some variables, which are current rating and volts. We'll set them to 0. Afterwards, we'll need to connect to our database. For this, we'll create a new file, which is called DBconnect. And inside, we'll place information for connection to our database. How we'll do this? Using the MySQL Connect function. But first, let's put in variables our initial settings, which are the host we are connecting to, our user, its password, the table, and the database we would like to connect. And then we'll pass those parameters in MySQL function and save all this information into a con variable. If it exists and it has some errors, we will display them to the user. Otherwise, we will not display anything. So we can test our connection. If it displays nothing to the screen, this means that it works correctly. In order to include this file and the code inside, we'll use the include once PHP function, and we have to put DBconnect.php in parentheses. Now let's type our SQL select in which we can select the different fields from this table. We are selecting the total volts fields, the total value, the used IPs, from the table name variable, which we already defined, which is called ratings. And the condition we are putting in the SQL is that the ID we would like to select is the parameter ID passed to the function. So if we pass ID of 1, we will get the result. So we save the result from the execution of the query into a variable called result. And we also save the number of rows returned by running this query. Let's check how many number of rows we have. Apparently something is wrong with our connection. This is the include once parameter. We have to include the PHP file. After returning and including the correct file, we see that if we type show stars 1, so we start the function and we type 1 as a parameter, we see that the function properly returns 1 row because we have such data. So we make this check if the SQL returns something. So if the number of rows is above 0, and then we save the returning data into a variable called numbers. And we can show, of course, what's inside of this variable by using the print command. Let's save the return data into separate variables. We'll use total rating, volts, and current rating, and we'll get the data from numbers. For the current rating, we actually would like to get the total rating divided by the number of volts, and we would just like to take only 2 decimal places after the whole number. We can check the volts, the current rating, and the total rating, and we see that everything is correct as we have it in our database. Now we will try to modify our displayStar function by passing the ID as a parameter and outputting it in our output parameter. So the moment we display the stars, we could see visually and numerically how much is the current rating and how many people voted. We correct a little bit the code, and the result is if we pass 2, we will have 250 rating because the total vote is 5. So the function is working correctly. Now let's deal with the case in which we would like to add some JavaScript in order to make the star rating interactive. So first off, we'll take a look at the XML HTTP request or the Ajax functionality. For this reason, we'll create a standard makeRequest Ajax function in which we'll make one HTTP request. And the moment we execute this request and from the server side, we have returned data, we'll just run an anonymous function and we'll log out with the console log the output. And next, we'll open the connection using the post parameter for sending the data, and we open the URL parameter. Next, via the HTTP request open function using the post method, we will send those parameters to the URL parameter the user passed to this function. Of course, afterwards, we have to supply that this is form URL encoded data so it can function properly, and we send the parameters. Let's try the function. We'll use our loopback interface, and as a first parameter, we'll use ID equals 1. For now, we will not specify the output element, but of course, we can create one output element. Let's say that we would like to target our star rating script. For this reason, we use the command query selector to choose all the elements which have a class of star rating, and we choose only the first one of them and pass it as output parameter to the makeRequest function. The reason for doing this is just when Ajax request completes, it will send its data to this output parameter. So whatever we have in our server side script, it will be placed dynamically in our output element. Next, we'll do some cleanup of our code. So we place our JavaScript into a separate file, as the same will be done with CSS file. We'll create a separate one and include it. Let's refresh. We see that we have no errors, and we have to see the output from makeRequest function. We made a post request towards certain URL. For now, it's not found, but we will correct this one. And for the output, we see got output, which is coming from the newly created PHP file. So we can also expect the element request. If we click on the headers and response tag, we see that the response is sent by post method, and for the ID, we send ID equals 1 as parameter to the server. Now let's invent a function which will be triggered once we receive the request and it's complete. So the moment we got this complete request, because it's asynchronous, we don't know at which time we can receive output from the server. That's why we make this check on line 20. And once the request is complete, we'll just like to select some output element and fill it with the property inner HTML using the returned response text from the request. So whatever the server sends us, we'll use it and fill our output element with it. But for now, we'll keep it simple and we'll just see what the server is sending to us. Of course, we'll create this output file, which will say sample output from post. It's a PHP file. We'll save it as a rating.php, and we'll change our JavaScript function or Ajax functions to make a request towards this rating.php file. For the output parameter, we'll give star rating, and the moment we execute and refresh the page, we'll see that it works correctly by outputting the correct text. So we can check from the network performance. We send certain parameters. We can change the parameters and refresh, and we see that by inspecting the network tab, the parameters are being sent correctly. The next thing we would like to do is to initialize our script. We'll do a window onload function. This function is good because in this case, we would like to trigger our code after all the elements in the page are being rendered. So first off, let's grab all the star IDs we can find on the page. So all the star elements, we'll get them by using the command query selector star icon. They'll be returned as an array. Then we make a check if we have seen those elements. Let's grab and count how many there are. So we use the property .length. We see that at first the elements are 0, but we'll change the query selector to query selector all, and this will get all the star elements. Then we see the correct number of 5 displayed. Then for each star, we would like to trigger an event. So the moment the user clicks on a star, certain function to be executed. So that's why for each star, we add event listener, and on the click event, we run this anonymous function, which has no name, saving the event. The event is important because we would like to know which star the user has clicked on. So we are logging where the user has clicked. And of course, we finish it with passing the parameter false. This is required from the add event listener. So the moment we click on the star, we will see that we clicked on li element, which is actually our star. If we try to count the stars we click on, we always get 5 for the numbers of stars. This is because the loop will finish with having a variable I at 5, and then all of a sudden it will add to event listener all these values of I. So the solution for this is to add a self-invoking function. So we just type this function in the brackets and pass the I parameter as a parameter to this function. This way we'll be saving this parameter and it will increment properly. If we do this by modifying slightly our code and test it, we will see that the moment we click on the star, it has correct value. Of course, now the first star has a value of 4. We have to correct this. So instead of I, we'll be logging the total stars minus I, and we'll again test the code. We'll see that the click order of the stars is correct. Next, we would like the moment someone clicks on the star to start one function and to pass 2 parameters to it, the event and the index on the star we clicked in. The event we're passing because if we have a lot of star elements displayed, by using the event data, we can get their IDs. And if we have IDs, we can put all this data into the database very easily. So we have 2 parameters, the event and the index or ranking the user is giving to a current star. So let's create this function. It will accept 2 parameters, the event and the index number. And let's log event current target. So we have the li element, but we are not interested in the current star, but its parent element, which has an ID. These are the 2 elements we can pass to the rate function. So we fill those parameters in the rate function. And actually, if we see one request when we click on the first star, it will be the vote is 1 and the ID is 2. Again, the ID is saved. If we click on the third star, the vote becomes 3. So now we will create the PHP script for saving the data. First, we have to grab the data. And our goal is to check if the user has already voted. If voted, we will not accept his vote. And if hasn't voted, we will insert its vote to the database. So let's see how we do this. First, we'll get the ID and the vote parameters. We'll check. And if they are set, we will return them into the variable ID. Otherwise, we'll return 0. So this is a simple way of using if condition. Of course, if the user is not providing ID or vote, we just type echo, please provide a valid vote. We can make another check. If the vote is between 0 and 5, I'll put the correct message to the user. Note the exit parameter. This will stop execution of the script from then on. We can check what is the user is passing with the echo. And we see that for the ID of the element, we're passing new element, and for the vote 5. So it works up to now. Now let's save the IP address of the voter. We'll use server remote address global variable. We can output it in the screen. And this time we are working with localhost. So this is our IP. We're now going to interact with the database. So we include our helper DBconnect.php file. And let's start selecting information about the current ID user is voting to. So we select the total votes, the total value, and the used IPs, where the ID is the submitted by the user. And we can check the result by running the query. Of course, we can check the returned number of rows. See that we have for now 0 number of rows because a new element doesn't exist. But if we check existing element, which is new element 5, we see that its rating is showing up and it's fetched from the database. We can provide different parameters. Our script will grab all the data from the database and display it. Now we have to decide if our number of rows equals 0, which means it's the first time our user is voting. We will save this voter's IP into one array and we'll serialize the information inside. The next thing we would like to do is to insert the row into the database. So we create our insert statement and we'll insert the vote, and we'll also place the number of votes as 1 because this is our first vote for this ID, and we execute the query and write to the user, thank you for your vote cast. In the next case, we check if we have entries for this ID in our database. So if we have such entries, we would like to grab all the voted IPs. This time we unserialize them, so we decode those votes and we check whether in those votes resides our submitted voter IP, which means that we check if the user already voted for this exact element. And if it's not voted, we'll write that you have not voted yet. And we can check by changing the IP address and click, and it displays no voted yet as an information. Next, we'll calculate the total value and total votes. This information we need in order to recalculate the number of votes and their values. So we just grab the current vote, which we have saved in the vote variable in the beginning from the line number 4. And then we add to it the numbers from the database. So the current vote is saved in the database. Also for the votes, the number of votes, we increase them by 1 by doing 2 pluses in front of them. We can also see the IP addresses, but for the IP addresses, the next thing is to push our address we're voting from into the big array. With the array push function, we're just adding to the already existing IP addresses ours, and afterwards we serialize the data in order to put it correctly into the database. So in insert IP, we have the collect numbers of IP addresses which have been voted for this star. As you can see, total of 2 IP addresses were voting. Now it's time to create our SQL. We'll update the table and we'll update the current role. So that's why we have this condition when ID equals ID. And we'll set the new total votes, total value, and used IPs by the information we just provided. So next thing is to run the SQL by using query SQL, and of course say to the user, thank you for your vodcast. Now we go back into line number 13, in which we check if the user IP address is inside in the database for this current star rating ID. So if it's inside, we should prevent him for double voting. That's why we write on the line number 32, okay, you have already voted, and we exit the function. So we are testing it. We're trying to vote for an already voted element, and we see the output element of you have already voted. All right, guys, let's see how we can transform this script in order to use PDO, which is, let's say, a more secure way of storing and retrieving data from MySQL-based storage. Here is our database. We have 1 element, 2 votes, and we have 2 used IP addresses when we were voting. In Visual Studio Code, we'll start to rewrite each of our files. So we have database connection file, and then we have stars.php and rating.php, which will have to implement the new functionality inside. So far, we see that for the connection, we're using MySQLi. First, I'll start by commenting all those here variables. I'll leave only the table name. I'll also comment this here, those lines, and in their place, I'll write a try and catch block. What is this? Actually, we'll be trying to do something, and if there is an error, we'll display it on the screen by this catch statement. This is another way of error handling in PHP. Since we're using PDO, first we'll create 1 new connection, PDO. It will be of type MySQL. And for the host, we can use the variable from DBhost. Just we can type this address, which is localhost, and we will set in the connection string DB name of ratings. Of course, you can set a different database name based on your connection. Afterwards, we would like to connect with the root user. We'll specify a password. So this is basically the connection, and we will use this previous variable con to set it here. The next thing we would like to do is just for debugging purposes to set some properties of the PDO connection. So type connection, and now we'll invoke 1 function, our method inside of this PDO object. It is called setAttribute. Inside, we'll type PDO, and we would like to set the attribute error mode. This is only for debugging purposes. You don't need it in actual production code. And then we would like to catch any exceptions occurring. So again, error mode exception will grab this time. So we're trying to connect to our host using this data here, the username and the password, and we're trying to access our database name. If this block here stops to work, in case of bad connection, we would like to catch the raised exception. So this code will raise an exception, and we will catch it here. We'll type PDO exception, and we will save the exception in 1 variable, E. We can echo some information from this exception. So we can just type get name here. We would like also to stop executing our code. Let's save and try to see what will be in our browser. We see nothing is happening. Actually, we can debug further. Here we can write, let's say, connection. And here we will catch the error if it's not established. Let's again load up the browser. Okay, we see connection established. So we transformed our first file. We have access to the connection. We'll open up the next file, and this file is stars.php. Okay, so we have the calculateStars function and the displayStar function, and we are just looking for some SQL code that we have. So inside of the whole document, we just have one select here, which we'll need to modify in order to use the new way of work with the PDO. Since we're using a PDO, we will have to work with prepared statements. So our SQL will be one such statement. We'll create one variable called statement. And since we have already con variable from DBconnect.php, so this connection is here, and we can use it. Inside of this variable, we can use the prepare method. We would like to prepare the whole statement here. So we just copy it and paste it here. Okay, we delete this SQL. We can place back quotes to those column names, and also we can put the whole query into 2 rows, and the table name we already have, and this is also a column. Here we'll make some changes. So where ID equals to ID like this. This is a little bit specific parameter, and it's an external parameter which will feed into this query. And now let's set this parameter. So we'll type stmt bind param. And inside, we will specify as a first argument what we would like to bind. We are trying to bind this placeholder here. We would like to bind the ID to this. And since we have the ID passed here as an argument, we'll just type $ID, which will be our variable. And the nice thing as a third parameter of this method is that we can specify what kind of variable we're trying to expect. So we can use a predefined constant, which is PDO param int. This means that whatever we are passing here, it will first be checked whether it's integer, and only if it is integer will get stored into this parameter, which will fit our query. Now the next thing is, again, we'll use a try block, and we will try to run the query. So we'll use again the statement, a variable, and then we'll type execute. We'll use a catch block. So again, we'll catch this PDO exception in a variable called E. And then, of course, we would like to echo a message of this exception. So if there is an exception, we'll get it on the screen. We can type here one exit for now, just to stop executing the code below, and try running this start.php. Okay, we click. So we see no database selected. This is our error. Let's see how we can fix it. All right, this error is actually that we have to specify our database name into our code. Since the database name here is ratings, we specify it here like ratings.ratings. It will be the output. Somehow on certain versions, the connection doesn't recognize this DB name parameter. That's why we had this error. All right, let's format a little bit the code. So we'll remove this space. Okay, we are trying to bind the parameter, try to execute the query, and we're up to here. Let's save. And when we try to run the code, we see there is no error. This is a good sign. Okay, so we continue. Now we have to get the result. This will be done by using the fetch method. So again, we'll have this result variable, but instead of our connection query with the SQL, we'll replace this with a fetch. And here we would like to fetch the result as an associative array. So type PDO fetch associates. Actually, we can type again exit, and let's see what we have with print inside of the result. And this should not be con, but actually from the statement, we would like to grab the associative array with all the information from our SQL query. Let's see in browser what we can produce. Okay, so we have our vaults here. So we successfully connected and fetched information. One more change we would like to make. We would like to get the number of fetched rows. We can replace this with not number rows, but actually from the PDO we have a special row count function. So that's how we will get the number of fetched rows. Okay, let's test how many rows we have returned with our query. will echo the number of rows. Again, here, this is not from the result. We're using only the statement. And let's check now, step by step. Okay, one row has been returned. This is good. We continue with the coding. Here, we see that we would like to grab the total value and the total votes. Actually, we have them already inside of this result here. So we'll grab them not from the numbers, but directly from the result. And this numbers row is from the old MySQL. So we remove it. And by now, all the logic should be clean and working with PDO. Let's test. Again, in the browser, we refresh and we see the current rating, the stars are being displayed correctly. The next thing I would like to do is to correct the third file, rating.php. So we enter inside the file, and first we'll inspect what we'll have to correct. So we have here one update, one insert, and one select. Okay, so we can start with the select, and actually we can copy a lot of the things directly from our previous code. Okay, we'll grab all this code here together with the SQL statement. We'll leave a little bit of space here, and we'll paste the code. We'll just grab what's inside of our previous query. Actually, it is the same. We want to have the result and the number of rows. We already have those here. Let's just check how many numbers of rows will be returned, and one exit just not to execute the later code here. So this should do the same thing. When we click on a star, it should display the numbers of rows returned. Let's test this in the browser. We'll open up our development console, and in the network tab, we'll go directly. We'll click. Okay, one is returned, so the code so far is working correctly. We remove this exit, remove the echo, and now let's see how to make the insert works. So basically, we would like to correct this and to transfer it to PDO. As we know, we have to use statement. So we'll type statement, and this statement actually will use the connection variable and of course the prepare, and we'll be preparing this SQL statement. It looks good so far. We're closing the function. We'll put back quotes to all those columns. And the next thing we would like to do is on the values, we'll specify named parameters, right? We'll put one semicolon in front of them. And our query is transformed. Then we'll have to bind the parameters. I'll just save some time and paste here the binding, and we'll try to explain you what's going on. So for the ID parameter, we'll be binding our ID of the current element, which we have here from the posts. So we are clicking on a certain element with its ID, and we're binding it here inside of our SQL query. For the vote, again, it's set based on what the user has clicked from our post, our Ajax request. The IP to insert is actually a serialized version of the voter IP, which is the remote address of the user who sent the request. We have discussed already this. Since we have them in such variables, we just have to think on what kind of type they are. So the ID and the vote are of type integer. Just the IP to insert, because it contains dots, I've put it to be of type string here. All right, so we're binding the parameters into the query. And again, we'll try to run the query and get the error if it doesn't work. So we'll just type this. It's the same from the previous query. Okay, so we save, and we have to modify our database. So we'll go back to the PHPMyAdmin, and we'll just erase all the information we have about that anyone has voted here. And this way, when we click, we should receive thank you for your vote cast. And again, this node database selected, we know how to correct it. We will just append the database of ratings in front of our table name. So once again, we are refreshing, we're voting, and our vote is counted. Let's work on the next case. So this time we would like to update the table. Before doing this, we see that we would like to use the previously fetched result. Actually, we have inside of the variable result all the data that we need. So instead of using numbers, we'll use result, and we'll delete this just like we did in the previous file. So just type result. Here also we're using it, and here we've set up the total value, the total votes, and now it's time for the SQL. The procedure is exactly the same as before, so I'll just paste the code. So we are updating the table, and we're setting the total votes value and used IPs to their parameters, which are bound here. And For the where, also we are looking for the specific ID, and we are binding the ID to this parameter, here ID. Last thing we would like to do is to execute the query. Instead of the old query string, we'll replace it with this already familiar statement. We are trying to execute it, and we'll get error if it's not working, and we'll have thank you for your broadcast. So now to test the code, we'll need to modify a little bit our database, since we already have a record, and if we try to vote, we see that we have already voted. We'll modify our IP address inside of the table. So let's say we'll type here number 10, and right now there will be one vote, but it will not come from our IP address. And when we click on the star, we'll have thank you for your vote cast. Again, we forgot to update our query to place ratings in front of the table name. So we'll click again, and we see that the rating is working correctly. And that's how you correct your code. You can use it in other projects as well. Now your code should be much more secure. Right, this time we'll see how we can actually support more than one rating on our page. So for this, in our code, we just need to duplicate the cover of show stars with a special ID attached to them. It's up to you what kind of ID you can attach here. And just one note, it's better to use a string in front of the number so that we can avoid some errors when selecting those IDs with JavaScript. And for this, of course, it's good to change some of the code where we're using an ID. We will not be binding to parameter integer, but parameter string. This is for stars PHP. For rating.php, again, whenever we are binding to ID, we've changed the bind to parameter string. So this is just in 2 lines here in all the code. And probably the biggest change that you need to do is to include one wrapper to our previous code. This is just to be able to attach ratings or click events to all of our elements that we have. First, we are creating a selector that will select all of our elements that we have. Then we are having absolutely the same functionality as before. So we are repeating the same code for each of the elements displayed on the page. Here inside of our database, it's good to change the field from integer to varchar or text, because it's suitable for setting characters and integers inside. You can specify the length of the field also depending on your needs. That's how our data will be represented. This is our ID and the total votes and the value of the votes, as well as the used IPs here. All right, after making those changes, let's see the code in action. If we click on an element, we'll see thank you for your vote cast. And if we refresh, we see that we already have one vote. If we try to vote again, we see already voted. The same is true for the other ratings here. All right, thank you